Hi, I want to discuss. Stop it. I want to discuss dogs, and particularly creatures with dogs' heads today. And I've got this creature. She's called Sweep. And actually, there was a student at School of Slavonic who was called Sweep by her friends on account of her squeaky voice. But anyway, to the issue of dogs and dog heads. This is a recurrent theme in European mythological history, going right back to the early Middle Ages. The conviction that there are people with dog heads living just across the horizon, and occasionally they will interrupt our way of life with their savagery and their bad behaviour, and they're drawn on the edges of maps and the edges of illuminated manuscripts. There you can see them. They can't speak to one another because they can only bark. So you always see them gesticulating, waving their paws around. And the conviction that the dogheads were real people is one that continues right through, certainly to the 15th, into the 16th century. The first dogheads are thought to live around the Baltic and to be cohabiting with Amazons, i.e. fierce warrior women, and to in some way be involved in the slave trade that operated out of Prague. Prague is a major centre for the slave trade up to about the 12th century. And it was naturally thought that the dogmen would buy slaves to use them presumably as some form of dog meat. Then the real dogmen appear, namely the Mongol Tartars in the 13th century, and they storm Central Europe in 1241. They sack Pest. They sack Wrocław in Poland, Krakow in Poland. Most of the cities of Hungary are felled, most of the villages destroyed, and the Mongol Tartars are thought to be dogmen. And in proof of that, the Mongol Tartars are led by a Khan. And you will know from the English language the word canine, which means dog-like, and it derives from canis, the Latin for dog. So obviously they are led by a dog. And when the Turks appear in the 14th century, they are thought likewise to be dogmen and to be led by a dog. Suleiman the Magnificent is said by Luther to be half a dog. He isn't, by the way. He's said to be half a dog. And right through into the 20th century, Russian villagers believed that the Turks had tails. And when Russians have captured Turks during the First World War and bring them to POW camps, the locals turn up to see whether they really do have tails and snouts. But that brings us to the Turks. The Turks are a formidable force, and they have been advancing up the Balkans since 1350. They capture Constantinople in 1453, a real psychological blow to Christianity. This is East Rome. This is, along with the West Roman Empire, this is seen as the direct continuation of the Roman Empire. It's also a very splendid place with fantastic buildings and a remarkable court which has got all the latest mechanical devices, thrones that come out of the ground and whiz about, fountains that play. It's got absolutely everything you could want, musical instruments that play themselves. So this is a tremendous blow. Hungary is at the forefront of this, and the aim of Suleiman the Magnificent, the Sultan, the aim is he wishes to certainly push into Hungary to convert it into vassal status. He probably isn't intending to occupy it. It's a bit far north. Generally, the Turks don't come out of the olive zone where olive trees grow. They are reluctant to press much further forward. And in the summer of 1526, the Turks organise, Suleiman organises an expedition against Hungary. And he knows full well what the Hungarian kingdom is able to deploy against him. He's got agents that are reporting back on the shape of the army, and he reckons it's going to be the biggest military struggle that he's been engaged in to date. And accordingly, he summons and calls into existence a double army. One is made up of his Balkan contingents, and the second is made up of his Anatolian, what we would now call mainland Turkish contingents. So he mounts a double army of about 75,000 men. And this army slowly makes its way up through the Balkans. They muster at Adrianople, now called Edirne, which is now in European Turkey. They muster there and then follow the old Roman road network up through Niš in Serbia to Belgrade, and then running along the course of the Danube, running on its right bank, i.e. its western side. And they are met on the 29th of August 1526. It's a Wednesday. They are met by the Hungarian army. The Hungarian army is controlled and run by the top general, a man called Tomory. He's been a military commander most of his life. He's decided to become a Franciscan, a friar. But he's the king says, look, we really need somebody expert to run this. And Tomory goes to meet the Turks, and he chooses the location very well. The Turks have a standard battle tactic. They've only got one tactic. It takes people time to work this out. And once they've worked it out generally in the middle of the 16th century, then they're able to defeat the Turks quite easily. But Tomory knows how to do it. The main aim of the Turks is to encircle you. They fight on a very wide front, and they then come round the back and start firing arrows into you from behind. They essentially surround you. So, in other words, what you need to do is to take them in an area where there's going to be defences that stop them doing an encircling movement. So Tomory meets them with the Danube on his left side, and he engages them. And he engages them when they're disorganised. They think it's late afternoon when the two armies face each other, and the Turks think it's time for supper, and they start getting out their tents, putting up their cooking pots, and it's then that Tomaree attacks, and he's very successful. He smashes the left wing of the Turkish army, and he envelops the centre. The problem is twofold. Firstly, he at this point he writes and says the battle is won. We've won. We've got their centre. We've got their centre. We're hitting them from two sides. The problem is that the centre consists of musketeers, janissaries they're called, and the sound of the musket fire frightens the horses. I suspect they've got camels there as well. The smell of camels. Horses don't like the smell of camels. They will rear. So don't introduce them to your paddock at home. And the army Hungarian army moves into a condition of disarray, and at that point the second Ottoman army appears over the horizon, and that's really it. The fighting starts about 4 o'clock. By about 6:30 in the evening, it's over. The Hungarians have been put to flight, and you can see this graphically illustrated on the videos that I have put up. There's a fantastic digital recreation of the battle. I thought, oh, cool, they've got thousands of people playing these parts. It took me time to realise it was a digital reconstruction. But have a look at it. It's very, very accurate. It's Hungarian, but it's got English subtitles. You'll be able to follow. The king dies on the field. Louis II, he probably falls into a sluice and drowns. It's one of the problems of wearing armour. It's difficult to get up if you fall over and get covered in mud. Within 36 hours, the Turks are raiding the Buda countryside. And at this point, the crisis develops politically. The political crisis begins. And I will deal with the political crisis, hopefully, tomorrow. Thank you.